Hello, I've had a couple of comments recently on YouTube that I'd like to respond to. Firstly, somebody picked up on the fact that I must have said that at some point I lived in Essex. Well, I don't now, but I used to. And that Rega, the record playing or the famous record playing and hi-fi firm, also come from Essex, and therefore that must somehow mean that I had something to do with them in some way. Well, I can assure you that is not true. I have nothing to do with them. I don't get paid or anything by them to publicise them or anything like that. What I speak from is purely as a customer that's very satisfied with their products. So, you know, don't believe that. That's just not true at all. They made a comment about the fact that all my hi-fi was by one manufacturer. Well, again, I've had various different manufacturers of hi-fi. I just happen to like the Rega sound. I just like the way they sound together. And if you listen to some of my other hi-fi videos, you'll hear that, you know, I've had Ruark speakers, I've had Rotel amplifiers, I've had a Goldring Lenco record player. At the moment, my setup isn't completely Rega anyway. I've got a Sony mini disc player, I've got a Creek phono stage, and the phono stage is incredibly important. Rega make phono stages, I haven't got theirs, I've got a Creek one. You know, I've got a Goldring cartridge at the moment. Rega make cartridges as well, and I'm not using one. So, you know, it just what I've felt like using in the past. Okay, I've had one or two questions about the old 2M Blue cartridge that I used, and what the differences are between that and the Goldring one that I'm using now. Well, the 2M Blue cartridge is a much more analytical cartridge. It's also not a particularly high-end moving magnet cartridge. It's good. It's by no means bargain basement. I mean, moving magnet cartridges start at about 25-30 quid or £30 GBP, and go up to, you know, 10 or 15 times that amount. The 2M Blue then is, I suppose, a fairly low to mid-range moving magnet cartridge. It lacks a little bit of get up and go about it, a little bit of life about it, which the Goldring has in spades. You know, it's a really involving cartridge to listen to. It's also has a much smoother treble sound to it. It's not a reduced treble. It just makes you aware that the Autophon 2M Blue has a fairly bright sounding treble cartridge to it, or treble sound to it, and the Goldring's bass is much fuller, and yeah, I mean that's basically the difference between them. It's a more refined and detailed sound as well. The stereo images are much clearer and firmer. I had a slight problem, by the way, with when I first started doing transfers with the Goldring, that somehow or other the stereo was slightly shifted to the right. I've pinpointed the problem actually when I listen via the speakers. For some reason or other, having the mini disc player switched on in the which is going through the in and out sockets of, you know, the tape loop of my amplifier. For some reason, the stereo image gets a bit softer that way. So stereo imaging is much sharper in real life. So yes, that's really the difference between that. I also had a YouTube user called Ivanhoe someone. It's a Ivanhoe and a few digits that I keep forgetting. He has basically, I think, just discovered or revived an old record playing setup. It sounded from his email or from his communication that it had been stored away for a long time, whatever, and not used in a bit, and had records in pretty much the same sort of condition, and said that they sort of tend to sound very dusty and very bad, really. So really, in that situation, you need to sort of, I suppose, start at the source and work your way down in terms of what the possible solution might be. Especially if it's all your records that sound bad. You need to, that does sort of pinpoint the record player as the fault. I don't know what record player it is you're using. You probably said, but I've forgotten. But yeah, so I would start with the record player. I would first of all check that you're using a good stylus. Make sure, especially if it's not being used for several years, that your stylus is a new one. There are websites on the internet. A good one is Needles and Spins, that have most cartridge makes on there, even for manufacturers that are sort of, that you might think don't exist anymore. So check them out. Make sure you've got a good stylus. Make sure your stylus is clean. Especially if your records aren't particularly clean, the stylus will go along, it will pick up dust along the way, so that by the time you've got to the end of the record, it could be sounding quite poor. All right, make sure your records are clean, and I will talk about at this point Rager themselves, because this is another big thing that's been thrown at me as well. Rager themselves do not like people to use record cleaning fluid. They say that claims are grossly over-exaggerated. Yeah, so Rager say that record cleaning claims are over-exaggerated. Well, in some ways they are, because record cleaning stuff can be very expensive. You only need a basic cheap-ish kind of kit, like the disco anti-stat that I use. I wouldn't use any homemade methods. It's too hit and miss. The fluid that you get with the disco anti-stat dries off, just totally evaporates into the atmosphere. You cannot run the risk of leaving any fluid left on a record, and some of these homemade things with washing up liquid and baby wipes and God knows what else, they just, to me, sound very suspect. So yeah, I'd just steer clear of homemade methods, and do it once every couple of years or something like that. They don't need cleaned a lot. Some people get a bit obsessive about it and do it every time the thing's played. Well, I mean, no, just that's too much. You know, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. So just don't, you know, in moderation. If your records are still sounding bad after a good stylus and good and clean records, then it is probably time to actually either look at the deck itself in terms of what kind of repair it's in. Check the leads, especially if you've got detachable leads. Make sure that you know perhaps a rewire or a new lead can sometimes make the difference, or it might just be a bad sounding amplifier as well. And again, you know, if it's been stuck somewhere, then all of the delicate bits all need to be cleaned out with dust, with like a proper sort of cleaner that will get rid of the dust. I don't know anything at all about that. You'd have to take it somewhere and get it serviced. But really, they should be okay. Just it's cleanliness and dust that is the problem. You know, get rid of all the dust and it should work. And hopefully that has sorted you out. All right, okay, so I will post this up and speak later. Bye.